Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed to make Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard, and we're back with Something Who podcast. And this time we're looking at how journalist and companion Sarah Jane Smith was introduced in both the original and new series. So first we'll look at third Doctor story The Time Warrior from season 11. Then after that we'll examine 10th Doctor outing School Reunion from series 2. And with me to decide whether these stories are front page news or half a column somewhere deep inside are two Something Who regulars, our favourite storyteller Paul.
Good evening.
Hello. And science and astronomy writer Giles.
Evening.
People always say that they hate those podcasts where they go rambling on for hours without actually talking about the subject. So perhaps we should dive in and start talking about School Reunion, written by Toby Whithouse and directed by James Hawes. I guess my intro for this, I'd say, I haven't really said it yet, but I guess like a lot of the people who made the new series, Sarah was my companion, I suppose. You know, I was 6 at the time of the Time Warrior, and just about 9 when she left in the Hand of Fear. And I guess, you know, although there are other companions later on that I felt, you know, some sort of affinity with, I didn't connect with anyone else in quite the same way. It was in that kind of childlike way, I suppose. So I loved her in a kind of, you know, in a pure sort of a way. She was like the friend that you'd want to have. And I suppose rather like Tom Baker, when she left in the Hand of Fear, I couldn't really forgive Louise Jameson for not being Elizabeth Sladen, despite the fact, of course, that she's very good as Leela. What does all that mean? I suppose it means that I'm a bit like David Tennant or the 10th Doctor here, and while Sarah Jane Smith in School Reunion is a woman in late middle age, it's still kind of like revisiting your first love, and it's, you know, it's clearly Sarah. So anyway, that's there's my preamble.
Must hit hard for you. You'd think that I'd have a different reaction because I didn't grow up with her. As my first Doctor Who memory is The Hand of Fear, obviously I didn't have a strong attachment to Sarah Jane Smith, so she's just part of my life as a fan. Through my later childhood and teenage years, and I suppose it may only be a few years later that I discovered what a Sarah Jane Smith is. But even in the late 80s, you know, it wasn't until I was nearly a grown-up that I saw her on screen for the first... No, I forget the 5 Doctors, but, you know, saw her glory years.
Yeah.
I was one of that generation, or every subsequent generation who came to her having been told that she was the quintessential bestest Doctor Who companion ever, and had to watch a few stories, not even starting with the Time Warrior. I still had to watch a few before I got it. I seem to remember. My point is, you might think I'd have a more intellectual feeling of, it's Sarah Jane Smith back again. That's good, because she's something from the old days of Doctor Who, that thing I like, rather than this is something from my childhood, which would get me in the gut. But if that's true, if it is true that it's just an intellectual exercise and nostalgia, it works, because I tear up in this throughout. And I think that's a combination for me of, I don't know, I think it might be slightly more than 50-50, slightly more the way it's written, what it means to the characters involved in this piece. It's impossible for me to know what I would think if I was a brand new fan who had never seen her before. And that's what I think is the most interesting thing about this, that it's written to appeal both to people who know who she is and the brand new fans who, well, I was going to say, who need to have this broken to them, that the Doctor has had other friends before. That's by far the most interesting thing about this, the fact that it's the first time in all these years that we explore that, isn't it? So, having rambled on about that, I'll fade into the background again for a bit.
I mean, Charles, what about you? What's your Sarah Jane Smith relationship?
Probably somewhere between the two of you, and she was never. I really probably became a fan in the Leela period. So
Yeah.
I would say that was when I was that would be when I was getting the TV comic Doctor Who Winter Special or whatever it was, and
Yeah.
so I was becoming properly aware of it, and so it's that thing. I know I'm trying to think whether I've really got memories of her on screen from the time, and I'm not sure that if I do, then they can only be very vague. But again, possibly things like Weetabix cards and stuff like that would have
Yes. Yeah.
even been these peripheral things like that, and so I guess you got to know from these other bits and pieces before you ever really had the chance to watch her on video. And I'm trying to think when first time I saw her on TV was probably Genesis of the Daleks, when they repeated that for the Doctor and the Monsters season or whatever it was called.
Yes.
The one they did after the year after the Five Faces, and then I'd obviously caught some of the VHSs when they came out, even if I didn't have a VHS player myself. Oh, and Canine and Company, of course.
Yeah.
That seminal moment. I mean, that would have been squarely on target for you as well, Paul. So I think there was always that. The fact they did bring her back, and I don't think we knew at the time that there was talk about. Did they talk to her about coming back to Bridge to Tom Baker crossover, or was that only Louise Jameson?
Oh, I think it's more recently been established that he asked both of them, didn't? Or at least
that's my recollection. I don't think we knew that at the time, but I think the fact that they did the Sarah and Canine, that obviously boosted her in her standing in my young kind of coming to grips with fandom. I realised, okay, she must be a cut above in that sense that she's got this reputation. But anyway, all of which is a very long way of getting to the story that we're watching, and just really probably agreeing with Paul that even it's not necessarily an exercise in nostalgia so much. It's just a very well put together and very very well crafted and very well acted, and yes, so it does get the emotional punch. I think just the same as as if you'd grown up loving her on screen as a child, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something about that performance, particularly in the two Tom Baker seasons that she did, that sort of transcends pure nostalgia into something that I guess when you see it later on, it still becomes a strong thing.
Oh yes, of course. I mean, there's no question that she is in 2006. If you had to pick a character to fill this role, this function, you'd pick Sarah Jane Smith for all the reasons we've discussed.
Yeah.
But if she hadn't existed, you'd have had to invent her, I think.
Yes.
As I've said in the past, I sometimes find Louise and Tom more enjoyable to watch together on screen at times, but it's almost the realism of Liz when she's playing it. The realism of Sarah Jane is great, but she's slightly lacking the archness maybe of some of the other parts, and sometimes that's what you want when you're dealing with these absurd situations. But again, the fact that she is and was such a great, just a really damn good actress. I think that's why they can carry it off here. At the risk of sounding Sudi, she brings an emotional truth to the role, to the part, on her return.
We still very rarely had seen this sort of scenario explored in the programme, have we? Even getting over 20 years later, and when we have, on the few occasions we have, it's been much shorter cameos, where, like in a couple of them in Power of the Doctor and so on, where you wouldn't be able to get the same, where they've had, in each of which there was a slightly different spin on it. But this was, I guess, a one-off. You never get a chance to explore it this much depth again.
Well, equally, I mean, you wouldn't believe anyway, I think, that either Tegan or Ace had spent 30 years pining for the Doctor. They're different sorts of characters, aren't they?
What's interesting is the way in which the thoughts about what a companion does after they leave the Doctor have changed since 2006, because to the extent that anybody had thought about it at all before then, I suppose it was the writers in the Wilderness years who had come up with a variety of different approaches to that subject, but often quite cynical. and dark. And
Yeah.
a bit possibly a bit up themselves. I mean, it's good stuff, but also for every good take on it, there was what they did to Dodo,
Yeah.
which if you don't know, look it up. But I suppose had we all thought that they just got back to their ordinary lives, only less so, and fell into
Sort of.
depression and ennui and big alcoholism. That's what early Big Finishes tended to, when they touched upon it, did that. I think that's how they treated Tegan in when she made her first guest appearance in Big Finish, which was a one-off. There's no suggestion she'd done anything with her life other than get completely trying not to swear.
You've got the sequence in Mordred Undead, haven't you? You know, where he's going through the former companions there, and they kind of have just drifted off into mundanity, haven't they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when writers have had to deal with it, and of course the Brigadier becomes a school teacher through bizarre casting behind the scenes, but there's no suggestion that Sergeant Bennett got promoted and went up through the ranks and is leading a glorious career. He becomes a used car salesman, and that seems to be that seems to set the template. So my point is that School Reunion is the first step down the different path towards where we are now, which is that pretty much all the companions, if they had what it takes, carried on being the Doctor, doing the Doctor's work, wherever they got dropped off, which I don't think is what people thought. Am I being unfair? Was it just me? Before 2006. So here we get a dip a toe in that water. Sarah Jane Smith is still investigating. Is there any particular suggestion that she's made a habit of investigating supernatural and alien things, or is she just here because does she think there's something uncanny going on in the schools? Is it just has she just gone back into the world of investigative reporting in general, including its earthly side?
Well, she says there's a UFO, and then kids are doing strange things. So yes, there's something uncanny about it.
Yeah, Mickey's the one who gets the dialogue that kind of fills us in on the.
I really must start watching these more closely.
He gets the backstory of why the idea that they.
So we it's hinted at that, but on the other hand, we don't get the impression that she has a massive alien computer in her attic and her own gang of young companions, and that she's literally being the Doctor, which grows out of this, and as I say, is where we've ended up now. 15 years after this, we've now got that half of the ex-companions work for UNIT, because the next step along this line is in her own show, Sarah Jane's Adventures, when we get the list of that little update on what's happened to certain other people who've met. And they're all up to something, aren't they? Ace with her Charitable Earth, and Dorothy with her Charitable Earth. Who else is in that list?
There's Ian and Barbara, aren't there?
They haven't aged, but it doesn't specifically say that they're still. Oh, and Joe Grant, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
With he's spawned a whole progeny of companions to carry on her work. So this is purely Russell's take on what companions do. A very proactive, very positive, big, generous take on, which is very different from the world of the New Adventures.
Yeah, although interestingly, when given the opportunity to write companions out, he always does it in kind of slightly dreadful ways, doesn't he? Well, not always. I guess. Freema's character gets a decent-ish write-off, but certainly Rose and
it's a mixture. Rose is going to carry on doing good works, but just in another universe.
Yes.
So it's a mixture. Martha goes to work for UNIT, of course.
Yeah.
Donna is the obvious exception.
Do you think that Rose is the new series version of Sarah Jane? I mean, is she the definitive companion still from the new series, or have others kind of come along and nabbed that spot from her?
Tricky one.
I think she probably is the definitive. I mean, she might not be our individual favourite, but I think
she's stuck in people's minds because she's so vivid, and the relationship between her and the Ninth Doctor is set up so clearly, and it's such a good performance. But on the other hand, it's had a sort of negative side as well, in that it's set up this idea that the Doctor can just take anybody and say, "Wow, you're brilliant, you're special, you're amazing," You're the best of humanity, without necessarily having to show that. Now, Russell does go to great lengths to show Rose's qualities in her first few stories, but the flip side of that is we get people like Ryan and Yaz who are told they're the best that humanity has to offer, when the writer has kind of forgotten that you actually need to show rather than just telling.
Maybe in post-Brexit Britain, they are the best of humanity. I mean, look, I would hope not.
There's a lot of talk about what it means to be a companion, isn't there, in the first couple of years of Who? Because we've already had a whole business of Adam in the first series, showing what a companion isn't. And then there's the ongoing story of whether Mickey is good enough, has got what it takes. So is this exploring that from yet another different angle, or is it taking a step back to show the bigger picture? I mean, obviously what it's doing, I suppose, is presaging. It's as much preparing the audience for the departure of Rose, isn't it, as it is an intellectual look at at this topic, just for its own sake. We've already had forced upon us the fact that the Doctor is not necessarily permanent, and now you don't have to prepare the audience for that. They're not stupid. You could just drop a piano on Rose at the end of her last story, and they just have to deal with it, wouldn't they? But I like the fact, if it's not already clear, I like the fact that we get prepared for it in such a sincere way.
Do you get a sense for how much of this is RTD and how much of it is Toby Whithouse? And I mean Phil Collinson as well, I suppose. But because I guess because the idea clearly seems to come from RTD and Phil Collinson. They talk Elizabeth Sladen into doing it. But at the same time, it's a fantastic script, which, you know, you've got to imagine that the credited writer has a fair chunk of responsibility for. I don't know.
Apparently, RTD had the idea that you would do it, and you would do it with Sarah Jane from the 2003 attempt of, you know, the slightly abortive attempted reboot at that point. So I think he always knew. I guess he always knew it was a story that was worth telling. But then apparently he initially wanted to do it. He initially thought, okay, maybe in year 3 of the new series, and then, okay, well, maybe late in year 2, and then it ended up,
Did you mean, Richard, specifically the finished script? Because obviously there's no way of knowing, but because Toby Whithouse is quite a fixture for the first few years of Who, he keeps coming back. I assume
this is his first.
That must be because he's good, and they
and
they actually use what he writes. And of course we have other examples of his writing and his own show running. He's always been a big fan, so I'm happy to believe that he wrote most of this. Take a sidestep into negativity just for a second. The only bits that don't work for me are those little forced bitching sessions between Rose and Sarah Jane. I don't believe I'm the only person to have found them slightly contrived. And they're not really... I don't really feel like either fully in character in those moments. So somebody seems very keen to get those moments in there and write them to the hilt and get the full comic potential out of those moments. And it does seem to... It sticks out a bit to me, so I don't know. I don't know if that's Toby... It's either Toby doing what he feels he's been briefed to do, or it's not him, is my opinion. But I could be wrong. Wouldn't that be great? Toby, I know you're listening. Please get in and tell me I'm wrong.
It feels to me like Sarah would be upset, I suppose, that, you know, there's a prototype Sarah with the Doctor, but I'm not sure that she'd necessarily attack it in quite the way that we've seen. I don't know. I mean, it's good drama.
I think it's slightly demeaning for somebody of, you know, her age and maturity.
Exactly.
To get drawn into it.
It seems on brand for Rose to act defensively
and yet, of course, you know, if she's the best of humanity, shouldn't Rose be above this as well? But it's fine. I understand.
No, but then again, we've just had Tooth and Claw, and we know in season 2, you know,
in context, yes.
Yeah.
Of course, slightly related, but also even less related from a different point of view. It's immediately followed by yet another story where the Doctor makes a very firm female friend, and Rose gets a bit angsty about it. And of course, that it is Just like you were saying about Time War and Invasion of the Dinosaurs being scheduled rather oddly, considering there's similar plots. This is more explicable because, of course, Moffat didn't tell them what he was planning to write, did he? He just came. They said Madame de Pompadour, and he came back with a story about the Doctor getting obsessed with a woman.
Oh, right, okay.
Spencer and Rose getting jealous. So I guess they had to tone that down, perhaps, once they realised it was going to clash a bit. But it works fine. It works more as a restatement of what we're already seeing, and Mickey glosses over it by saying, "Oh, look, it's happened again." So they get away with it.
Sarah's still a journalist.
Yes.
I can't quite decide whether she actually is working for the Sunday Times doing a profile of this guy, or whether that's just a ruse that she said that she's from the Sunday Times and that's appealed to his vanity and that's got her in. I could go either way on that, but nonetheless, she's believably still working as a journalist and, censors a story of some sort, whether it's a puff piece in the Sunday Times or whether it's something a bit more meaty for somebody else down the line.
Some people, sorry, it's slight non sequitur, but some people accuse this and say, oh well, of course, when they bring Sarah Jane back in School Reunion, they completely rewrite her relationship with the Doctor.
That's exactly the point I was going to bring up next.
And they make it.
Go on then.
They make it this pseudo romance sort of thing that it never was.
I think it's vague enough. It's never spelled out that it was romantic. I think it's left vague in a way that I feel like everyone should be happy with it rather than anybody being unhappy. But yes, I do remember that. I do remember people saying, why did Sarah never move on? What? Because it wasn't that sort of relationship. Well, that's rather silly. It wouldn't have to be. It was clearly extreme. It was both a very strong personal relationship, no matter how you define it, and also the most extraordinary part of anybody's life, which is the main point this story is going on about.
Yeah.
It's talking both about the lifestyle he throws people into and then whisks them out of again, and also his own personal magnetism, which I guess is the thing he isn't aware of. He's not aware of the effect he has.
See, I think a man and a woman, or a Time Lord and a woman, can have a relationship that isn't necessarily a romantic. It's not a physical relationship. It's not it's not about physical attraction necessarily, but it's still very deep and very so that even if they didn't have a romantic relationship, it would still impact the rest of your life. You'd still be thinking, he is this person that I connected with on such a deep level. No other subsequent relationship has quite that same depth to it. So, I can buy it, even though I do agree that there's not really a hint that they are.
It's such a strong connection that it has to be considered an emotional connection, and that means you're in the realms of love with a small L. Yeah, which could equally easily be a platonic form. There's no need to assume that we're going to the realms of romance here. I don't think. I think that's a bit of that. That's well, I was going to say incel. I think that's a bit of the that faction of fans that just don't want to. Back in the day, we don't. It's less common now. That didn't want any hanky panky in the TARDIS. I guess we're overreacting.
I think maybe it is just a hangover from the fact that because the template of the template they were setting up with Doctor and Rose was romantic, so therefore. You by making any comparison between Rose and the Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith's relationship with the Doctor, that was sort of mapping a romantic element onto that. Whereas as RTD went on, and we obviously had the Doctor and Donna, that relationship, and that is the an exact parallel to what you were just talking about. Yeah. In that it's a very intense relationship of and the most extraordinary part, and this is maybe one of the first times where we get to that point where it's a bit of a corner that subsequent showrunners do kind of paint themselves into, Russell and Moffat to some extent, with making the relationship and travelling with the Doctor so extraordinary that you have to keep on coming up with in extremis reasons why that journey comes to an end, instead of it just being that people have had enough. Although again, Russell, for all that he claimed, okay, he wrote himself into a corner with Martha's character, in some ways he actually was also smart enough to say, well, why doesn't she just, why don't we just have a companion that leaves?
Yeah.
So we don't get stuck in that situation. And the fact that, I know it's so long since I've seen The Hand of Fear, and I pretty sure I've watched the last 5 minutes of it, but you do get the fact that with the way that Sarah Jane is written out, it is an unfinished story. It's not like Joe, who makes a conscious decision to leave and be with Cliff. It's not like Leela, who makes a conscious decision to go off and be with Andred.
Yeah, romance of the century.
God knows why. But it feels like most of the other companions, you also, in addition to the fact that Sarah Jane is iconic, she also does have this very abrupt.
Yes.
I've never thought of her leaving scene as perfunctory, but it does leave a sense of unfinished business, which makes it very easy for them to pick that up here and sort of explore that. Yes, you've been left hanging for half your life.
Yeah.
Always.
And the only problem with that, because I absolutely agree with you. I think it connects really well with The Hand of Fear. The only problem with that is we've got K9 and Company and we've got the Five Doctors. If they hadn't kept bringing her back, I think it would have worked a lot better. But I mean, I guess we can. We perhaps dramatically expunge those from our minds. But yeah, and of course, there's no opportunity for Sarah to connect directly with the Fourth Doctor, the one who left her. She gets to meet the fifth and the third.
Well, we can always hand wave it away and say, "Oh, she doesn't remember that."
Yeah, possibly.
It does feel to me like she's not supposed to have remembered it. To the I mean, as far as they can express an opinion on that through not addressing it, it does feel to me like you're supposed to think it didn't happen somehow.
Right.
And that would be very in character for Time Lord stories, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's and of course, the flip side of all this emotional introspection is that we get to hear the Doctor's side of it, don't we?
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't have a heart of stone. Maybe he has a good reason for not wanting to keep these people on board forever.
Which, I mean, it is surprisingly sweet, isn't it? In a way, that he's trying to. Well, or is it? Is he trying to spare himself pain? I don't know. I mean, at least he's acting from sort of noble motives, I suppose.
He said it in a slightly harsh way. It's typical of the 10th Doctor at this point. But you die, Rose. You humans. Oh, thanks very much. Also, it's got that bloke from Buffy in and some bat monsters.
Yes, yeah. Let's talk about so in terms of what Toby Whithouse did do, as I understand it, the initial template for this was something called Black Ops, and it was going to be set on a military base or around a military base. So the entire plot was basically, the Doctor runs into Sarah Jane while she's doing some investigating, and the initial template was a military base, some aliens who'd taken that over and were using, presumably in a somewhat similar way to the way the Creditanes are using the school children. We're using the nearby villagers to calculate / manufacture some super weapon. And apparently that all got scrapped because, they were pleased with it, but Russell T reckons there was too much running around and having the presumably multiple settings just meant too much plot contrivance.
Right. Blimey. He actually wrote the draft for that, did he?
Oh, apparently. I believe.
What a waste of time.
Yeah.
I think you'd be able to spot that at, as I say every single time, you'd think you'd better spot that at storyline stage, but...
you got me wondering. Maybe it wasn't.
No, it's not that important.
No, I just want... Yeah.
What I mostly think when I watched this is it's quite a slight story, but it's very entertaining, and it's about the right sort of pitch at the right sort of level.
Yeah.
To give us a framework for the real meat, which is all the stuff we've already been discussing. And they're quite nice looking aliens, and we have a very strong, nicely written, nicely played lead villain in from Buffy. And I always think that every time I watch it, until I get to the point where they unveil their real plan and what they're doing with these kids, when I think, oh no, it's one of them.
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're saying. I don't believe it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Can't they just be up to no good? Why are they? But there you go.
Apparently it reached, just to finish Black Ops, apparently it sounds like it reached treatment stage, and then that was where it was.
Oh, that's all right.
They liked it, but they felt,
It's more pleasantly macabre than these. We're set in a school where big bats are eating children.
It's fun. I've forgotten about the pre-credit sequence. That's quite nice.
Yeah. I mean, you don't normally get a child eaten before the theme music, do you?
No.
I love that little look he gives at us out there as he's closing the door into the head. Oh, he's fantastic in this.
Yeah.
Apart from their appallingly overcomplicated and tedious plan, I quite like the basic idea of the Krillitanes. I was always surprised he didn't bring them back again. I mean, not that we could have had Anthony Head back, but...
Well, I'm surprised they didn't bring him back. We don't see...
Well, I would have done. I would have had him back, and the Krillitanes make some use out of that very distinctive... What do you call it? Their...
Well, the MO, the idea that they absorb...
which we don't get to see, because they look the same all the way through the story.
Yes,
so it's a bit of a waste to give an MO like that and then not show us it.
Yeah.
But unless, of course, you're setting it up for them appearing in the future looking different. But we never saw them again. There you go.
It's interesting that they only have one sort of oil, the Krillitanes, and it's Krillitane oil.
I mean, Sainsbury's has got up a dozen types.
Yeah.
Rice Bran is my favourite. Has a high smoking point.
But yeah, no. If you're a Krillitane, there's only one sort, and it's fatal to you as well, which is a bit of a drawback, isn't it? But the chips are delicious, so that's the plus point. I absolutely agree with you, Paul. I think it is. I think it's a slight story, but it's just enough so you don't get distracted from the emotional journey. So yeah, I mean, what I quite like also about that climactic scene, where they reveal it's the Scasis paradigm, whatever that is that actually it's Sarah who pulls the Doctor out. The Doctor looks for a second as if he might be almost half seduced by Finch. Well, and Sarah's the one who says you can't fix pain and loss. So I like that beat of it, even though the Scasis paradigm is obvious gibberish.
That's the nice thing about it. That does give it a bit of heft. The fact that Finch can is tempting the Doctor, if you want to go for your religious metaphors or whatever. Yeah.
We're not doing links yet, no pun intended. But links. But I mean, we do get, it's another one with a villain who gets to have a proper one-to-one tete-a-tete intellectual meeting of equals with the Doctor.
Yeah,
it's framed in sort of spaghetti western style, isn't it? For no particular reason, but it's all.
Yes, and musically, it's Murray Gold leans into that. He's got quite a few little stings right from the start. Anytime Finch appears on screen, he gets a twang of spaghetti western guitar, it seems.
I enjoyed James Hoare's direction. I've only just remembered. Did he do the Empty Child in the first?
He did, yes.
Right, which I thought was. I must have been a big fan of his at the time. I thought he was the best in the first series, and then he mostly lived up to that promise in the second series. But there was that controversy over his work, wasn't there? So he never came back.
Was there?
But he still was there. I don't know.
He did this in Christmas Invasion. He was going to be producer of. He was going to produce Torchwood, and then he apparently discovered he preferred directing.
He's still doing it. I knew I'd seen his name recently. It was on Slow Horses, the
yes.
Apple TV spy thing. So well done.
It suffers interestingly. This plot, the story line here suffers from the same thing you were railing about last time, Paul.
Oh no!
The noble sacrifice thing. In that,
the
sonic screwdriver can do anything in the new series. It can wash dishes. It can, it can go super. You probably break the speed of. You could travel from London to Edinburgh in 2 seconds if you needed to, but it can't unlock a deadlocked seal, whatever one of those is. So K9 has to sacrifice himself.
I would be a lot more annoyed about that if it wasn't that K9 comes back again 5 minutes later, better than ever.
Yes.
So it's kind of pointless. But well done, K9. Good dog.
Yeah.
It's very just clever thematically, the way that, considering it's actually juggling 4 companions, as well, because you're kind of getting you're getting Mickey's perspective and him providing a commentary on, pointing out to the viewers what's going on, and also the stuff with K9 and so on. And obviously this is the story that's the kind of making of Mickey, in terms of that he then says, well, can I come along? It keeps on. That's the thing. It's one of these things that reminds me a bit of groping all the way back to the last time we recorded Survivor, where we said, if you kind of come at a topic, you find a theme and come at it from every possible angle. It feels like this is the same. Only the question is, what's it like to be the Doctor's companion? And it's just like, okay, let's have. What does that mean? You've got everything from the noble self-sacrifice to the to being the hanger-on, to all these different little angles that it keeps throwing up at it. So I think in terms of the Krillitainer, I know we've had the Reapers in Series 1, but they're possibly it feels like they're the first of those kind of CGI monsters that we're going to get, CGI monsters that don't interact with the real world all that much in their fully CGI flying form or whatever, and that becomes a bit of a...
That was pretty obvious in some of the cuts where, where they attack our heroes outside the restaurant where they are, and we just see reverse shot with no interaction whatsoever. And then when they run past them in the corridor, it's a bit like those awkward shots where they interact with the CGI Slovene. Yes, it is.
I noticed there's a couple of point of view shots that reminded me of the werewolf point of view shots in Tooth of Claw. They just vignette the outside edges of the frame to imply, with the camera chasing after people. And I think, the Skasis paradigm is, yes, it's a MacGuffin. It's all a bit daft and it's a bit throwaway, but it's also, I don't know, I'm minded to let it off those things because it's also, I think, pretty much the first time we've had some of these things in the new series, and when you start revisiting it, but and it is. I think that there's the right amount of plot, and it doesn't. You don't want a hefty plot when that's not the point of what you're doing, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're going to get something similar in the next series with the Shakespeare Code, but for now, I agree. It's one of those. It's the first time, I think you're right, we've come across something that's like that.
Yes, yeah. Well, we get that one, then we get Vampires of Venice bit. But, that's the sort of alien swarms thing. Feels like we get more than those, but we probably do.
I wonder how feminist Sarah from the Time Warrior would feel about the fact that when Rose and Sarah get their one scene together, all they can do is talk about the Doctor.
Fails the Bechdel test, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Goodness me. Ostentatiously so.
I mean, the other thing that she doesn't pick the Doctor up on is that at the end he calls her my Sarah Jane. I mean, I think in 74 she just said, I'm my own Sarah Jane, thank you very much. But maybe she's also in 30 odd years has mellowed a little bit and doesn't feel the need to assert herself in quite that way.
Yes. Depends whether she sees him as a man or not. Is he more than just a man, or is he a man as well as being more than a man? Or is I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, they could have covered that angle in terms of showing Rose that her perspective is rather narrow and limited, and that she still thinks the Doctor's boyfriend potential rather than Time Lord Victorious. They could put a right from Sarah Jane Smith's angle, but somehow they don't. They leave it. They go the other direction and make it. Oh dear, it's so odd. I know what I should have said earlier. Mm-hmm. When they meet, it's the Doctor that gets emotional. Now, of course, this is contrived because Sarah Jane doesn't recognise him.
Yes.
And she makes up for it later on when she does know who she is. But have we ever seen the Doctor get so dewy-eyed and tongue-tied over bumping into an old friend before?
No.
Thank you. So, is that in character? Is that just to tell us that Sarah? Is that so we believe that Sarah Jane Smith is special? It doesn't feel like it's been contrived to make a point to the noobs in the audience. To me, it feels very real.
It's one of those things, isn't it, of life imitating art. Of you've got David Tennant in the presence of Elizabeth Sladen, and at the same time you've got the 10th Doctor in the presence of Sarah. But yeah, no, I mean it does seem to be suggesting that this is a person with whom the Doctor has made a particularly strong connection.
Yeah, can't quite imagine him having the same reaction if he bumped into Tegan again.
Well,
very unfair.
I mean, she was quite happy when she bumped into Tegan again, but it wasn't. You can get all dewy-eyed. She still had more of an eye for Yaz at that moment.
Yeah, 13th Doctor doesn't do emotion, of course. So
it's clever the way it's constructed that just because of the plot mechanics, we get to have the emoting from the Doctor first, and then we get another scene where we can have all the emoting on Sarah Jane's side.
It is clever, and it would have been so easy just to skip that first one and have the one that we're all expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what else that we should be talking about. I mean, we've probably given Mickey about as much room as he deserves. We've talked about the writing. We've talked about the companions. Well, look, David Tennant, he's not quite the 10th Doctor that he will become. He's it's still relatively early in his tenure, and I guess I've forgotten
it is. Yeah,
he didn't always have the kind of huge quiff and the kind of slightly angsty performance. He seemed he's relatively unencumbered by that in this.
Yes.
I enjoyed his performance. I think the longer he went on, the less I enjoyed him. But I think I was happy. I like this aspect of it.
It did get me mulling over, wondering what he's going to be like when we see him again.
Yeah.
It was this Christmas Invasion of New Earth, so it's Block 1. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So it really is very early in.
The thing is, I have a lot of affection for David Tennant, but just have slightly less affection for the 10th Doctor sometimes. But I'm hoping. I'm really hoping that the forthcoming specials are going to be something special. And he was great, I think, in the 50th anniversary thing. So, yeah, I shouldn't really have any qualms about it.
Who knows? We remain in limbo about all of this.
He's back paired with his best companion.
Well, I think, aside from I've got links between the two, perhaps, as Giles laughed. But yeah, I don't know. Have you got any other things
funny about that?
Yeah, is there anything else you want to say about this story before we get into that aspect of it?
There's a couple of nice things, gags written in there, like the undercutting kind of things that we get in a couple of places, like the pulling the plug, the answer to undermining the. I think that's nice, and the whole thing of when Kanan wakes up and says, "We're in a car," like when they have to get into the into the thing. It takes Mickey about 4 repetitions to realise what the point of it is. And there's some nice humour in there as well. So it's just nice little moments that I noticed.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of slightly undercutting some of the, I guess, scenarios in similar films or TV where somehow they never seem to do the obvious thing. I agree. I like that. It's slightly knowing, but it's not pulling you out of the story. Okay. I guess before we move on to things, one last thing I'd say was, as a person, I didn't ever take the opportunity to find Liz Sladen and to tell her how much she'd meant to me when I was growing up. But thankfully, there were other people who did that for me, and they turned it into an episode of Doctor Who.
Well said.
Yeah.
Okay, the first obvious link that I found here was journalism. So in both cases, Sarah is arriving in the story as a journalist after a story. So that's simple. And I think you mentioned this already, but in both cases, the Doctor has previous with the alien race. So.
Oh yeah, off-screen previous.
Yeah. And actually, the other way round too, as you mentioned.
Both alien races have opinions on the Time Lords.
Yes. Yeah. This is probably true of almost. I mean, it's definitely true of the Cybermen. It's probably true of almost every alien race, which is they're utterly invulnerable except for one weakness. It's the Achilles heel, isn't it? It's the probate vent and the krillitane oil. They're signposted early, and actually, it's a nice. It's a nice touch the way that Hal finishes off the Sontaran, isn't it? In that it's telegraphed perhaps, but it's Chekhov's probate vent, I suppose.
Yes. So you're saying it's true of every alien species other than the Cybermen, because
no.
Because the Cybermen have a different Achilles heel every time they
every time.
Oh, what's it going to be this week? Radiation. No, it's gold. No, it's
yeah.
Nutmeg.
Yeah.
5 Doctors is lactose intolerance.
You've got the aliens souping up the contemporary technology to do something that it couldn't otherwise do somehow.
True. Yeah.
There's a big bang at the end.
Yeah.
But of course,
the main setting gets blown up. Yeah.
One of them uses CGI in a slightly unconvincing way. The other one cuts to footage of a quarry detonation.
Yeah.
Slightly too late to disguise it as anything else.
Yeah. And finally, I've got Spuds. I mean,
I wonder why you were sitting.
Erroneously, in the Time Warrior novelization, you've got Sarah Jane peeling potatoes. It doesn't actually happen in the TV version.
Yes.
And you've got Chips in the school reunion.
Oh, good point. Companion has to work in the kitchen in both of them.
Yes. Yeah,
Brilliant. I wish my mind worked like yours.
I'm beginning to think that my links section just simply proves that there are some aspects of a Doctor Who story that are universal, rather than that the two that we've picked are necessarily thematically linked. Although I think we've got a better one than we usually do.
No, it was terrific. Well done to whoever suggested it, Giles.
Is that it? Should we go for the close?
Yeah, I think.
Let's wrap this sucker.
Okay. Well, look, thanks for listening to Something Who. If you've enjoyed what we've done, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast, as the reviewer at the start of our episode did. And I think the first episode we put out from this recording, if indeed I split it in two, as I often do, will be our 100th episode. I mean, it won't be the 100th numbered episode. It'll only be episode 82. But I think there are, in total, 100 podcast episodes on our site once that one goes up. So there's plenty for you to listen to anyway while you're waiting for the next one to land.
More than enough, some might say.
Yeah.
and yet we carry on.
It's amazing, isn't it? So look, if you like Something Who, please tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, your neighbours, and all your social media connections. But look, if you don't like us,
get on X and Threads and spread the word.
Absolutely. If you hate us, please don't tell a soul. So thanks, Paul. Thanks, Giles. It's been great chatting with you again.
Ta-da.
Yes, has indeed. Ta-da.
And we look forward to bringing you some more Something Who in the near future.
I wouldn't go that far.
That killed the conversation.